Welcome to Original Being, where we explore the timeless wisdom of ancient practices and old ways of living, from holistic health and wellness to survival techniques, homesteading, and primitive skills. I'm Jillian Erice, a functional and holistic-minded physician associate and a homesteading mother of 3. I am on a quest to reconnect with the knowledge our ancestors lived by, practical skills, natural healing, and self-sufficiency in a modern world. Each episode, I'll be sharing insights, experiences, and conversations with experts and everyday people who embody this mindset. Together, we'll challenge modern conveniences, embrace hands-on learning, and rediscover the practices that have stood the test of time. Disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. My opinions and those of my guests are solely our own and are not affiliated with any institutions, employers, or certifications. This podcast does not provide medical advice, and any health-related decisions should be made in consultation with your personal healthcare provider. By listening, you acknowledge that you take full responsibility for your own choices and actions. Hello. Today on Original Being, we have Sam V. Perry. He's a Western Mass-based ambient music composer with a focus on site-specific work that captures the feel and essence of a place. His work has been featured in theatrical productions across the U.S., and he currently has an audio experience running at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art. Sam is also the lead guitar player in the award-winning indie band Cloudbelly. And he happens to be my little brother. Hi, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk to you. So the reason I wanted to have my brother on, besides the fact that he actually wrote and composed the music that is in the intro and the outro for Original Being, is that he's also had personal health struggles that he's sort of healed and put into remission naturally and with diet. And his experience with that, I think, is really interesting. And also just to talk about, his life in the arts and pursuing the arts and maybe kind of a career off the beaten path that maybe isn't something everyone feels like they are allowed to pursue. So a lot of things we can touch on today, Sam.
Great.
Let's actually start with your health stuff, I think, because it's a really interesting story. Talk about how you first got diagnosed and what happened, and then, your path to healing.
Yeah, so I have Crohn's disease, and I didn't find out until I was 25, and at the time I was living in New York City, trying to make it in music. I had a different band there, at teen, and it was a particularly stressful year because my wife is an actress, and she was on a national tour, so she was gone, and I think just that oxytocin regulation of like sleeping with your partner every night is very grounding and very important for me. And so I sort of felt untethered. And, just the grind of the city. And as you can imagine, it can be a pretty brutal place to live in. And I was working, multiple jobs and then staying up super late playing gigs and so I really wasn't taking care of myself. I was not sleeping as much as I should have been. I was under a lot of stress, and all of a sudden I just started having really terrible gastrointestinal pains, and I had never really experienced anything like that. And it was 25. I was young, and I just I thought, oh well, I could just change up some diet things. I could just drink less or surely it's some little thing, but it persisted no matter what I did. And it got to the point where if I ate pretty much anything solid at all, I would have like pretty excruciating pain, like felt like knives in my lower left quadrant. And I couldn't, and it was like keeping me up. And I also foolishly was putting off seeing a doctor because, I was still on our dad's insurance, which was based in Massachusetts. And so I was out of network, and money was so tight I didn't feel like I could pay out of pocket to see a doctor. So I was putting that off until finally I had a shift where I was bartending. And I remember I pretty much couldn't stand up straight. I was like doubled over the bar, like trying to shake drinks. and just like pale as a ghost. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is very bad. And so I got on a bus for my 2 days off and to get some testing done. And 2 days became 2 weeks of tests. And at the end of which it was determined that I had Crohn's disease. So it was a pretty scary, pretty scary thing to have happen. It's a lifelong condition, autoimmune condition that you have to deal with. It's not like there's a cure or anything. So, and I was told, if you don't take care of yourself, this can degenerate to the point where you have to get sections of your intestine taken out and have like a colostomy bag, and it can really change and kind of ruin your life. And I qualified for like disability and things like that because of it. But I'm an artist and I'm a go-getter, and I was like, I still have, I have a lot to do and to make, and I was like, I'm not going to let this, stop me. So I made a decision to really do everything I could to get the disease under control. And the beginning of which was to do the Western medicine things that were prescribed to me. And I think at that time when I was so inflamed and in so much pain, I think that was important. But then in the long term, I think the more holistic, natural things that I've done have ultimately made the difference in terms of keeping me in remission. So, and I don't know.
Well, in the beginning, I mean, that must have been, a pretty serious diagnosis for a young man to get. And you're looking to the medical providers to give you guidance of like, well, what next and what happens from here? And is it correct that at that time, like dietary stuff and more natural treatments were just really not being presented to you as even an option by the doctors you were seeing?
Yeah. And so, full disclosure for those listening, Jill was there with me for a lot of my appointments and stuff, and was kind of helping guide me through this. But yeah, so I mean, like I said, I think it was important. I was on Humira. I think that was it just stops the autoimmune response, and that was important for a time. But it also raises your risk for lymphoma, which is a very small chance. But I didn't want any chance of that. So I knew I wanted to do other things, and I was told. I remember asking my gastroenterologist at the time. I was like, so like, let's talk about diet. Like, what are the things I can do dietarily to keep this under control? And I remember he just looked at me and just said, "Oh, that diet doesn't matter at all." And I probably like had a poker face, but I wanted my jaw to hit the floor. I mean, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Is how could diet not affect it? And I remember we left the office, and I was like, Jill, how could he possibly say that? That's crazy. And I remember you saying, well, I can tell you from going to school, we're just, no one's taught that, and we're just we're taught to find like the one drug that does the thing to heal people, and no one's really taught about this more holistic approach. And I mean, I was super glad to be able to bounce ideas off of you and have you're on sort of both sides of the coin, which is really helpful. But it was shocking to hear that. And so I ultimately, what I decided was to have a low inflammation diet, because everything about my condition is about inflammation. So I foolishly first thought, oh, vegan, like that's the way to go. And morally, I was like, oh, cool, like help be more kind to animals, like it's a good excuse to go vegan. It was the first thing I did, which ended up being a huge mistake, because as I now know, lectins in soy and beans is really inflammatory. And so actually I I kind of got worse for the few months that I tried being vegan. And I think importantly, for me, having done a lot of theater training and yoga and meditation, things, all these different sort of trainings that make you really aware of your body. I think I'm pretty good at listening to my body, which I know can be hard for people with diseases like this, to really be aware. But I remember I'm very distinctly aware of the way that certain foods affect me, and I can like kind of thread the from what I ate to how I'm feeling. So, which is an important skill that I feel like not everybody has. But anyway, so I could tell that these vegan foods were not good for me. So at that point, I switched to paleo, and then specifically at like anti-inflammatory paleo. So there's obviously no grains, no gluten, no dairy, no legumes, no nightshades, no processed like sugars or fats. And that was is more or less the guidelines I've gone by for years, but I'm much less strict than when I was first sick. But I was pretty strict on that for a good year at least. And I think that was
sorry to interrupt you, but how long do you think being 100%, so when you say very strict, like I'm 100% paleo, no cheating,
yeah,
how long, if you can remember, do you feel like it took to finally feel totally better, or that your gut was healed from that major flare up?
I would say a year.
A whole year, really?
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I remember
Well, the reason I ask is because I find that a lot of patients, if they are presented with dietary adjustments or special diets for all kinds of autoimmune conditions, not specifically just Crohn's, that it does feel really restrictive. And sometimes, depending on how their diet was to start, can be very hard and a huge lifestyle change. And so they may do it for a period of time that feels long to them, but it's actually very short in the life cycle of our cells and our body and our immune system and the healing that needs to take place. And then they quit and they say, well, it didn't help. It didn't help, but it didn't work. So, and then it's a great excuse to keep eating the way that they really want to eat or what they were already eating, because it's hard and it takes effort to eat clean and to be, prepping food and not be able to eat everything that you want out with your friends or at restaurants. So this is a mistake I see happen all the time. And it's kind of a travesty that no one is just educating on that, that yes, this does work, but it needs to be 100% with no cheating, quote unquote, because even little bits of some of these highly inflammatory foods can exacerbate conditions, but B, for a long enough period of time that you can actually see the results. And I think that's crucial here. And a year is long. I mean, I expected you to say more like 3 to 6 months or something. So that's even, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think something that was pretty successful for me is that I was viewing it as a lifestyle change. And so I just modulated, the way that I would grocery shop. And I had my menu of things that I would make for myself, and for Linda, that, was compliant with the diet. And then it just gets to the point where you don't think about it because it's just part of your daily routine.
Yeah.
And I was motivated because I was scared, because I had such kind of an extreme situation. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but I had lost about 40 pounds, and was really, I mean, I was not well. So, and I was in a ton of pain. So I think I was pretty strongly motivated to make a big lifestyle change. And then I think maybe after the year, I had a follow up with my gastro, and then I think at the point that I was told that I was in remission, then I felt like, okay, I can kind of like open myself back up to other things, and not be quite as strict.
Yeah. And I want to go back to what you were talking about, how you feel like you're so in tune with your body that you do know when specific foods are a problem. And I do see that with you when we're together. You're not just, regular paleo. You're saying, oh, I know I can eat this and I do okay, but I have tomatoes and that really hurts my stomach,
Yeah.
enough that you can feel these subtle things and adjust based on that. And I think that's really important for individuals. We like to do these blanket kind of things like, well, all of this is bad for this condition, or all of this is bad for inflammation. And people are really different. I'm super biased about dairy because I'm lactose intolerant, and dairy I find to be so inflammatory and exacerbates so many of my patients' skin conditions. So I'm like, no dairy, no dairy. But then I find somebody who does fine with dairy and they don't have any issues and they don't have any stomach problems and they don't have any skin conditions or autoimmune conditions, and they're doing fine with it. So who am I to say that it's bad for everybody? Know? Obviously, we can talk about quality, which we want it to still be high quality, grass fed, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's really interesting and really important for every individual to start to say, is this specific food that I'm told is okay for me actually not, or how is this affecting me?
Right.
And not everyone might have you have pain, right? So you can feel like, okay, this hurts my stomach, but some other conditions that it may not be so obvious. It might be more subtle things, or sometimes I tell people they need to just create a food diary. And if it's a skin thing, obviously that's my field of work. Create a diary where you're like, what did you eat? And then the next day this flares up. What was it? Let's look back. What was different? What was something you're not having every day that triggered that? So that is really important.
I did do a food diary for the first several months.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Which was helpful.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking of with Crohn's in particular, there is a genetic component, but the situation you were in when this triggered this huge flare up was city, working nights, so lack of sleep, stress, pretty poor diet at the time. And all of those things are such big triggers for all autoimmune conditions, but also just the body being so out of sync. So it's like you have this genetic predisposition, but then you're in this, lifestyle that does not support health in any way. And it is just so not right for the human body.
Yeah.
And then it's like, nope, we're going to stop this here because we're not happy. Yep. The cells, the gut, everything.
Yeah. One of the other things about living in the city is the lack of nature. I mean, just like being around trees, feeling dirt, like petting animals, which seems like a small thing, but I think there's something to be said about those microbes when when you're in and around nature and animals. I don't know, but it's hard to it's hard to explain if you haven't been like divorced from those things for an extended period of time. But I definitely feel like that was a huge factor too, of just like not being around trees and animals enough. You're just everything
or
just
the quality
concrete.
the quality of water. Are you drinking tap water? Like the quality of water in a city, it's either bottled in plastic and highly processed or chemical filled tap water.
Yeah. The New York City tap water is like, it does taste really good. It actually has it's like super filtered. I don't know what they do, but there's like a thing about the New York City water where like the bagels and the coffee are amazing because of the water. But I don't know. What else is going on in terms of the processing.
Yeah. And lack of sleep, I think, is just such a huge factor for everything.
Oh yeah.
And not even just that, but you've always been, quite a night owl. I think that working in the music industry, concerts, bartending, just you've always been a very late night person. But that is so not good for our circadian rhythm and our cells healing themselves and regenerating. I mean, sleep, as we learn more and more over time, is just so vital for our health. And I see that as another big trigger for a lot of autoimmune conditions as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I could still be better about that. But, you know, I think there's a difference between now, sometimes I'll stay up late working on recording projects. And then, you know, I'm able to sleep in the next day. But there's a difference between like choosing, you're being in a creative flow with what we call the midnight boom. And, you know, having to work that late because you're bartending in New York and like getting on a train, getting on a train at 5 a.m. to like get back uptown to your apartment. The different, the different type of thing, but
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well,
so
do you have anything? Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, it's not necessarily for everyone, but another really important part of my my journey to remission too was using cannabis. A big part of the reason why I wanted to move back to Massachusetts from New York was because they had started the medical marijuana program, and I did do some research and found some studies that showed that THC can help people with Crohn's achieve remission. So that was also really important for me too. I think cannabis should be really treated with respect because it's a medicine. I think it's easily abused, but if you do treat it with respect, it can be really, really helpful for a lot of things. But it was key for me, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I know we've talked about this personally because I have mixed feelings about cannabis, and we both have seen, you know, it be abused by people, but in the right setting, used in the right way for some conditions. I mean, there is absolutely an anti-inflammatory effect, and you, like you said, like a pain, you know, thing that helped you through some of these flare-ups. And I think that there is a time and a place for it. That might be a whole other podcast.
Yeah, true. For sure.
I guess the only other thing is just that, what do you find besides cannabis, diet-wise? Are you still following a mostly paleo diet at this point? And so, you know, we haven't actually told the listeners your timeline here. I mean, we're looking at about 11 years ago. So you have been not on any pharmaceutical medications for 11 years. And you also had, after genetic testing was done, to be found to have a very severe variant of Crohn's disease. So you were told that it was just going to be awful and eventually you were going to get pieces of your intestine taken out. So the fact that, against medical advice, basically, you put yourself in remission and essentially maintained remission minus like maybe a little bit of GI discomfort for 11 years is pretty profound. It's not like you just had some mild case and you know, you didn't listen. No, this is profound. People are not given options. People are not told that they can take their health into their own hands if they're willing to do the work and put in the effort and make these differences in their lives and help themselves. And regardless of whether you're on medication or not, that should be done. Like, that's the other thing, is I think that there's a mindset of, well, I'm going to take this huge, expensive, you know, immune modulating medication, and now I can just eat whatever I want because I'm on this medication. I mean, that goes across the board for every condition, not just this. I see this happen a lot too. And that is so inaccurate because the medications are amazing for some people, and some people do need them, and some people are not willing to make the dietary changes or major lifestyle changes, and they will not, and they would end up, you know, severely hospitalized with, you know, having, you know, major surgeries. And so, okay, absolutely, those people need to be on these medications, and they could be life-changing for them. But if you're on these and you're using them as a crutch to not make those lifestyle changes, and you're still getting flare-ups, which I still see too. People are still having flare-ups. They're still having problems on these medications too, because they did not do any of those other things. That's where the problem is.
Right.
So in your case, you did paleo, you were super strict. And then obviously you've had some moments of kind of cheating or having a little bit of, you know, maybe not technically paleo foods.
Yeah.
So what would you say at this point is the most sustainable dietary interventions that you've made that have kept you in remission for this long?
Yeah. So gluten and dairy are like the number 1 and 2 things. For sure, I'm not doing those. Very key. And legumes kind of shortly thereafter. I will sometimes, you know, I don't know. So for some reason, like beans feel like more innocuous. Like they seem okay to me, and every now and again I'll have them, and then I'll be like, why did I do that? So, but yeah, gluten, dairy, legumes, And then certain nightshades. So like eggplant I really cannot do. Eggplant kills me. Like fresh summer tomatoes are fine, but like a concentrated like tomato sauce, I can't really do. Um, and those are kind of the big ones. From there, I do, uh, I'll have like rice and corn, products like, and sort of gluten-free derivatives of those. For a while, I thought, I had included potatoes in with, the nightshade family. Um, but I have found now that potatoes are okay, um, which is good because Linda loves potatoes. Yeah, I think that's the basis of things. I mean, I always, I try to get really high quality meats. And I have a lot of spinach. I love it, do a lot of eggs. Um, so yeah, I definitely cheat more. Like I really shouldn't have as much kind of sugar that I have. When I'm really good, I kind of only have like dates for sweet things. But yeah, the big ones are gluten, dairy, legumes, and nightshades. Those are the kind of the big four.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about diet wise with this is you have gone on tour a couple of times with your band, and eating healthy on the road is quite hard. And I know only also because my husband travels a lot for work, and I made him do Whole30 this past month.
Nice.
and he was, texting me asking constantly, what can I eat? What can I eat? What's here? And like everything is so unhealthy. I mean, it's so hard if you're traveling and you're out at airports, hotels, to eat healthy. And
Yeah.
and again in the cities, gosh, it's just so difficult. So what did you do on tour to try to maintain and not flare up when you're like, again, probably lack of sleep, late nights, and then a lack of really good food?
Yeah. Well, we luckily 3/4 of the band are gluten free. So that's super helpful. That we kind of are a unified front there. But we definitely bring a lot of snacks with us. Usually have like a big like tote of like nuts and trail mix and like high quality granola and, jerkies and things like that. So that kind of helps just get you through the day. Um, but and also, I think being a band, um, it you kind of you're dropped into situations where, maybe the part of the city you're in or the people that you're around are a little more hip. So it's like it isn't too terribly hard to find a cooler, like better quality places to eat. But I think what's at the end of the day, there's definitely certain, types of food, that you can go to a restaurant and it's easy to be more compliant. So like Japanese or Mexican, for me, it's like usually, it's like a simple rice and fish thing, or it's like a simple corn tortilla taco, without, anything crazy on it. It's pretty compliant for me. But at the end of the day, also, it's like you can kind of go anywhere and just get, a piece of grilled chicken and like a side salad, and that's totally fine. I mean, I think that's the good thing about being paleo, and like maybe that chicken won't be grass fed or whatever, or pasture raised, but whatever.
Yeah.
You're surviving, so it's fine. Um, but that's a good thing about paleo, is like being able to have meat is just, you can just get something really simple and just ask a kitchen to make you something really simple, um, to get you through. And I don't know, it's interesting. I feel like I've been doing this for long enough now where I I don't know, I don't really have to think about it so much. It's just like usually I can look at a menu. I mean, well, truthfully, we'll look at a menu, and obviously I'm not going to like an Italian place. Like I pretty much never go to an Italian place because there's nothing for me there. But if we look at a menu and say, oh, hey, here's this Mexican place. They have like a simple chicken taco that doesn't have anything bad on it. Cool. On a corn tortilla. Like, so I feel like I'm at a point now where I can find an establishment, look at the menu and find something that's compliant, without having too much trouble.
Mhm.
But again, it's like, it's just about the lifestyle change and kind of modulating your expectations um, and just sort of, yeah, making that choice. I don't know. It isn't too bad on the road where we make it work. What is harder, I will say, is finding good coffee. So
Yeah.
we bring our own coffee in our little like AeroPress. That's helpful.
Yeah. You're a coffee
I'm a,
aficionado.
yeah, which I wouldn't say is necessarily the best thing
Helpful.
for Crohn's disease, but I put almond milk in it, so there's that.
All right. Well, let's move on. The last thing I think I have to say about that is just if you personally have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, don't just stop your medication if you're on it and just say, oh, I'm going to try this. I would say do your research. There's a lot out there from other people with these same conditions that have done a very similar thing or are following a paleo diet and put themselves in remission, and work with your provider. And hopefully a lot more providers are aware of this now and are looking at the studies themselves. You have to kind of search as a medical provider for the studies that are out there because they don't get the funding that the pharmaceutical drugs do. But there are studies, and there are lots of people who have their own stories out on the internet about how paleo diet or other variations have really helped them. So yeah, just take your health into your own hands and make some of these healthy changes because you're not stuck.
Yeah, and I would just, as a cap on my own story, I think obviously diet's huge, but I wasn't happy in the city, and I wasn't making as much art as I wanted to make, and I wasn't sort of satisfied with where my life was at. So when Linda got back from tour, we kind of made this decision to get, and I had gotten sick. We actually had taken a trip to Europe that we had planned for a number of years, and I remember we were in Venice actually, sitting in a little cafe in Piazza di San Marco, and I remember I was just so relaxed, and it was the first time in years that I was that sort of at peace and relaxed, and I felt that shift in my body, just my nervous system kind of not in fight or flight for the first time in a really long time. And I was like, oh my God, I have to get out of the city. And that decision, I think was equally as big as the diet stuff, is like choosing to change where I was and to move to a place that was less stressful and a place where I could make art, which is what I really wanted to do. And what I've just always, known that's what I meant to do. And I wanted to be in an environment that was more conducive to making art. And so I guess I was just eliminating all these like barriers that were in my way, and stopping me from living the life I wanted to live. And so I do think that there's this like psychological component based around stress and based around kind of pursuing your highest self that was part of my healing journey too, because I think my body was telling me something. It's like, this isn't working for you and you have to change. Yeah. And so obviously that isn't as easy, that answer isn't as easy for everyone. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of a little more spiritual, but that was super important for me. And I think,
well, what's also interesting about that is that I think a lot of artists, actors, musicians think they have to go to the city or they have to go to New York City, especially. I mean, New York City is like the place to go, which I think you and Linda, you both, had these visions of being in the arts and, well, we got to go to New York City and like pursue that. Yeah. And I think that's a noble, ambition.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that you're like, wait a minute, even though you're there, you felt less inspired. You felt less able to pursue your art. It was almost just like you were in survival mode, trying to function in this crazy, overstimulating city.
Yeah. And this is a whole nother podcast too, but but yeah, basically at the end of the day, it's just so expensive to exist there that you spend most of your time just working your side hustle trying to survive, and way less time actually making art. And I've, unfortunately, all of my friends that still live in the city, who are all a lot of talented people, none of them are making art now. All my friends, like literally none of them, because they're all had to, they all had to pivot and pursue a different career so they could actually survive. It was like basically like if you're choosing to stay in the city, then you need to find a different career path, because otherwise you're going to be completely crushed. So it's, in my experience, unless you really come for money or something, or you have a big break early on, I mean, if you're just, it's not really a place to make art anymore. But it's sort of
such a sad, no, but it's such a sad thing.
Yeah.
And so I think actually, so this is something I really wanted to discuss with you, because even though we're siblings, we followed very different paths in our lives and our careers. And I think part of that is just birth order. I'm the oldest.
Sure.
I have a strong personality, and I think being the oldest too, I try to think back to this. Like, I don't think mom and dad specifically were like, you have to, try to pursue this high powered career, or, you have to follow this specific route in my life, because I had this drive anyway. I wanted to be a veterinarian since I was little. And then that just kept pushing me forward. And I knew if I wasn't a veterinarian, I was going to be in some form of medicine. And I did hold myself personally to this very high standard. But when I look back, and when I've been doing a lot of like inner child work, looking at what brought me joy, what I loved, what like really lit me up inside, it was not medicine or science or anything like that. It was art. It was literally, I was oil painting, and I was writing, and you
were so creative, like in terms of like games we would play. You would come up with the craziest scenarios and stuff. But yeah, you were super creative and just super imaginative, and like, yeah, would create like worlds. I remember remember the willow tree, and then we'd go underneath and go into a magical world. Anyway.
Yeah, I was so imaginative. And I actually think, when I think about, I was a pretty depressed, not very happy teenager. And when I think back to that, and I've kind of analyzed this as the years have gone on, the moment I lost that childhood magic is the moment I was no longer happy. And I think it was because I had the time and the ability to pursue all of these interests I had, which I still have so many interests. But I had time to pursue the things I loved. And I was doing that. I was always pursuing my creative endeavors. And then when I got to high school and I set those really, really high goals for myself, like, well, I have to go to college and I have to get straight A's and I have to do this. And I would get into this cycle of stress, and I was so miserable. And I still, I held myself to this all the way through PA school, and still even now, it's very hard to break free from that mindset. But when I look back, and this is where I'm getting off track, I don't know that mom and dad necessarily made me the way I am or you the way you are based on how they treated us, although there might have been subtle things that they didn't mean to, just because our personalities were the way that they were.
Yeah.
But do you feel like they gave you more permission to pursue your music and your art than and allowed you to believe that you could pursue that as a career path, or that could be what you do in your life?
Yeah, they did. I don't know. I was always a really good kid. I was kind of like shy and scared of getting in trouble. So I just sort of was like the sort of easygoing, second child. And there is, of course, the stereotype of like the youngest gets to get away with anything. But yeah, so there wasn't a lot of pressure. It's just like, oh, this is what you're interested in. This is what you're pursuing. Cool. Like, go for it. Whatever. We were always expected to do well in school and to try. I think like our dad was always very much about, mediocrity is the quote he would always say. It's the death of whatever. He hated mediocrity. So we always had to do, if we're going to do something, we had to do it to the highest extent that we possibly could. So I think that's very much instilled in me, but whatever that was didn't matter. So I feel like, when I sort of pivoted into into the performance arts, like they were behind me. So I never felt like I couldn't do it. I was always pretty supported, I would say. What's been hard is, I think mom in particular really wanted me to be an actor professionally. And when I decided I really wanted to do music more, that was hard for her. But and I think it's still a little bit of a struggle for me, of them just not understanding my lifestyle and choices. But I never felt that they weren't supportive of me being in the arts.
Yeah. So when did you first really realize that music was your thing and your calling? Because my memory is you starting guitar, I believe, your freshman year of high school, and just right away kind of just loving it, diving right in and practicing. And I thought, wow, like I was really into Kurt Cobain back then. I remember reading about him, like sitting in a closet, just practicing nonstop.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, my brother is doing this. Like, like it was just something you loved immediately, it seemed like.
Yeah. I had always loved music. And I remember, listening to classical music as a really small child and wanting to play violin. And then when I think I was 5, I tried to do Suzuki violin, and it just wasn't for me. But I always loved music. And I did, chorus when I was younger. A lot of my friends and kind of people around me were starting to pick up the guitar in like 8th grade. And I had gotten really into like classic rock and stuff. And so I wanted to play guitar. And so I don't know, it just really clicked. And I had a great teacher that kind of set me on the right path. And I don't know, it was just one of those things. It just was sort of kismet. I mean, it just clicked right away, and I loved it. And I wish there was a more definitive answer other than the fact that it just was right, and it turns out it's always been right, because I could never read music, and I was never formally trained in that sense. So I didn't want to go to school for music, which is why I pursued acting instead.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I got to New York and started, working and doing some professional gigs, I remember I was in a show sort of off Broadway. There was this new experimental work called Alice, Grace, Anon, and it was Alice in Wonderland meets Jefferson Airplane meets Anonymous, sort of PSA anti-drug book character, and these characters kind of collide, and it was an interesting piece that sort of didn't get a good run because of Hurricane Sandy, kind of ruined the run, but well. But I was cast as one of the guitarist in Jefferson Airplane on stage. And I remember these professional actors kind of being amazed by my playing, and they're like, "Do you have a band? Like what are you doing? Like doing this weird play?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, I just graduated. I'm just trying to be an actor." And they were like, "Well, you're a really amazing guitar player. Like you should be doing that." And then there's a few other productions that I had been cast in after school. They were like my first few professional productions, where basically everything I was cast in was because I was an actor who played guitar. And then I just, the grind of just auditioning in the city really wasn't for me. And I realized, I'm not here. Like I didn't move here. I didn't pursue the arts to just like ask other people for permission to be an artist, which is what auditioning felt like to me. It was awful. And I was like, I just want to create my own opportunities and make art. And so I realized like, oh, if I have a band, I'm making art. I'm making my own opportunities. So pretty early on in my tenure in New York, I was like, I want to be a musician. I want to do this thing. And it's been, that was 2012. So yeah, it's been a long time now after having made that decision. And it wasn't until the pandemic when I sort of was like, oh yeah, I'm interested in other arts too. And I got back into painting and started producing theater and being involved in other things again, which I think is a problem with our society. Is in a capitalist society, you're supposed to focus on the one thing that's going to make you money, and only do that. Which, I think was important for me to really cut my teeth in New York and do that grind and just like gig every weekend and get my craft up. But it's really nice now to have the space to actually pursue all of my creative endeavors, because I have a lot of them. Like I love photography and also oil painting and theater. So I'm a lot happier now being able to kind of express myself in all those realms.
Yeah. Something I've always respected you for is, I remember even when you were younger, like even in high school, you wanted to make the art you wanted to make, and you didn't really care what people thought about it. Like when I would create a painting, I would think like, this has to look amazing. This has to look perfect. Like, so that other people come and tell me like, you're an amazing artist, but like you'd make some crazy stuff. And I'd be like, I can't believe he even like is putting this out there. Like,
yeah,
like, I don't know. But at the same time, as I got older too, I would really appreciate that. And you've done the same thing with music. People would say, or we do, your family, like, well, why don't you do covers? Everyone's on YouTube making covers, and you would be like, I do not make covers. Like, that's not what I do. Well, that's not what I want to do. That's not the music I want to make.
Well, that's nice, for people, but there's a difference between like being I think you can want to be a performance artist, like being a performer, being a singer or something, and go out and play covers. And if you want to play covers, like you can make money. Like you want to have a profession in music, you can do it right now by playing covers anywhere. You'll be good. But that's a different thing than being an artist and creating new work. And that's what I want to do. And I'm compelled to do that. I would be so, if I'm not actively working on creating something, I get really depressed. So that, yeah, it's a different thing.
But think about how many people can't pursue their passions or for some people, it's not necessarily an artistic endeavor, but how many people in this society, the way that we function, don't have the time or the ability to pursue what they truly love.
Yes. Yes. Which is a great point, and something that we've talked a little bit about, but I would love to address here, which is that I still have my full-time job, and I'm getting closer to paying the bills with music. But I have to make the choice, every day after a full day's work to come home, make a quick dinner, and then stay up all night making music, because that's the only time that I have to do it. And, we don't have kids yet, but, once we do, then that will be a whole nother thing to contend with. But yeah, it's like a second full-time job, and you have to make, I've definitely made a lot of sacrifices over the years, to do that pursuit, but I have to, it's just kind of, it's not really optional for me. That being said, after having, pursued this professionally for over a decade, I feel like I'm finally getting a kind of a foothold in my personal style, as a solo composer, and finding some real success with the band. And so like, yeah, this past year, Cloud Belly toured All in the Black, which, if you ever talk to like local touring musicians, like it's hard to get to that point where you're actually making money and not losing money while touring. So that was huge. And then, all the composition work, I did this past year paid really well. The like theatrical, I produced this theatrical, immersive experience called A Happening every year. And this year, we was gangbusters, and we made a lot of money on that. So it's like all my artistic pursuits are like actually making substantive money now. And so that feels great. And but it took a while to get there, but I do feel like I'm on the way to all these different avenues, actually making money and actually paying my bills, uh, which is amazing. Yeah, it took I think a lot of persistence, but like I said, there wasn't really another path for me. It's just what I felt like I've had to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to have seen you, grow and do your work over the years and just pursue what you love without reservations.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's been some reservations, but
yeah, I mean,
seemingly without reservation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it hasn't been easy. I mean, I always think about, other paths I could have taken, where I could have made a lot more money and, not worried about any of this stuff, but that wasn't my path, and yeah, I just have to, I've never regretted it.
Yeah. What about music as a meditation?
Yes.
So obviously there's one aspect, like you were just saying, that you're pursuing what you love and you have to do it and you want to do it. So that can create less stress by the fact that you're able to just do something you enjoy and love. But do you think that while you are playing guitar, does your mind go somewhere? Does something happen that's almost like a meditative state for your body?
Absolutely. There are two modes, where I feel like that happens to me. One is when I'm performing live. Um, uh, Usually, I mean, there are some moments that are improvised, but a lot of our live show is very well rehearsed, and you want to be so well rehearsed that you really don't have to think about what you're playing. And so when you're just up on stage, what you're doing sort of becomes automatic, and you enter sort of a flow state, and time doesn't really exist. And I mean, it's the best. It's really the best. I mean, it's like the best. It's the best high in the world, truly, and which is part of why I love doing it so much. If anyone's played sports, and you've like really, you're really on top of your game, and you like made the goal, or anything you do where you're so engaged in what you're doing that you just sort of lose time, and you're just so focused, that you enter that flow state. I mean, that's what it feels like. I think there is something that happens between your mind and your body where everything is so connected. And also when you're performing with a band, you're so connected with your bandmates too, and with the audience. I mean, it's just this sort of swirling sharing of
like an energy exchange.
Yeah, no,
cool.
there really is. It's beautiful. So that's the kind of one mode. The other mode is when I'm producing music, and particularly the sort of ambient work that I'm doing now. So I'm sort of laying down tracks and creating a lot of layers, and usually there'll sort of be a bass line, sort of drone, and then I'll maybe come up with a melody, but then but largely I'll improvise, and that's similar, but sort of a little bit different, in that, as opposed to performing live, where there's this big kind of energy exchange thing like we were just talking about, and you're connecting with different people, and sort of this looking outward. When I'm recording, and usually when I'm recording, like I said, it's usually after work, it's late at night. The rest of the world is asleep. Everything's kind of quiet. I'm in my studio, and that flow state is very meditative and very inward looking. And usually I'll have these really kind of extended tracks, and I'm sort of improvising, getting in this flow state. And yeah, that's as opposed to this sort of explosive outward energy sharing thing. It's like this sort of inward journey, that's very calming and meditative. And both are I feel very healing. and feel very that connect you back with your body. And I know there's been studies done about how playing music connects both halves of your brain. And so there's kind of crosstalk between the different sides of your brain. And yeah, I mean, I it's really, really powerful and really healing, and is part of the reason why I love music so much.
I love that.
Yeah.
Would you say that, maybe not necessarily with Cloudbelly, because I know that's a group effort, but in your own musical endeavors, are you influenced at all by like our ancestry, or maybe some of your recent travels? Because I know you've gone to, England,
Yeah.
Scotland, Italy, etc.
Yeah. I think that it's not always something that's like consciously on my mind, but I think that there's undeniably sort of deep rooted melodies sort of in our bones. I think like I do often think about our sort of Scandinavian, like Viking heritage, and music that's that comes from that culture is sort of deeply in me, and just kind of sneak out. I don't think that it's necessarily something I'm always thinking about. Sometimes, I mean, obviously, depending on the work that I'm doing, there's different influences, and some things that are more related to our heritage is in there. But I think that there is just inherently a thread through time. Do you feel like that's something you hear in my music? Is that why you're asking that? Or
A little bit. I mean, when you do these ambient sounds and these tracks where you brought in like sounds of nature,
yeah,
mixed in with stuff, I feel like that sounds like that. But I found that for me personally, but I think this is most people's feeling, when we hear ancestral sounds like old Celtic music or old Norse sounds now that are really popular, that it just like wakes something up inside of you. I mean, I think that it's almost like this music was so important. Singing was so important to our ancestors, and we've lost a lot of that. We've lost a lot of community singing of songs for moments in our life, births, deaths, celebrations, and it's still there a little bit, but not like it used to be. And people just knew songs, they're just memorized these folk songs in the olden days. And yeah, I think that that's something that's just in us. And when it comes back, it's just so profound and so moving, whether you're singing with a group of people or you just hear these like old sounds. And it just like wakes something up inside of you, and it feels so moving.
Yeah, I agree. Singing in general is incredibly powerful and healing. And if you don't have an opportunity in your life to sing, find one. Just find an excuse to sing. Seriously, I mean, I think you sing a lot with your kids, and obviously I'm singing all the time, but I think a lot. I feel like in general, it's a really powerful thing, and I think a lot of people in our culture probably don't find an opportunity to sing, and they really should. And especially, I've been thinking a lot about different opportunities to sing with a group of, like maybe joining like a local choir, because there is a whole nother thing that happens when you're singing with a group of people that's really incredible. So I would agree. And I'll have a little story. When I was in Scotland this past summer, we were at a pub, and like the most Scottish thing that's ever happened. It was like a Scotch pub. They had like hundreds of different scotches, and there was like a little band in the back, playing tunes. But people were going around in a circle sharing tunes, and there was this old. He looked like a hobbit. This like old, like proper little Scotsman with his little cap and his nice little jacket, and he had all of those classic tale kind of story songs.
Yeah.
And every time that it would come around to his turn on the circle, he would kind of face everyone and just like sing these little folk songs. just kind of include everybody and like make sure you had the refrain so that when the refrain came back, everybody could sing together. And like, it was incredible. And it was like, man, that was like such a tradition. And that is sort of, that is lost, and we don't really have anything like that in America right now. And that was,
That's what we need.
It was so,
America needs singing.
yeah, we do. Seriously, like that sense of community and culture unifying people. It was really special, and it was you know, we saw a lot of amazing things in Scotland, but that's like one of the memories, if not the memory, that stands out the most, was like this whole bar. Everybody was so friendly. And I feel like there's also this idea of like, you know, Scottish people being these like tough, but like everyone in Scotland was so nice. They were like insanely nice.
Yeah. Well, there's something I wanted to go back to, and I can't remember if this is an actual study or if this is just something I heard one time, but I never forgot it. Every time I'm singing or like alone in the car singing or whatever with the kids in the back, that when you're singing, it lowers your stress hormones and it lowers your cortisol, and it tells your body that you are safe. Because in our lives, say we're a human out in the world trying to survive in nature, if you were in fight or flight mode, you simply could not be singing.
Right.
That, you know, you can't slow down enough and project your voice in this like calming way if you're in a high stress situation. So that when the act of singing is telling your body that you are safe and you are happy. And so even if you're not, if you just start to sing, you can like trick your body into thinking that you are happy,
I believe
that you are safe, that you aren't stressed out.
Yeah, I totally believe that. That's amazing. I think, I mean, I certainly feel that way for myself. And then it's amplified when you sing with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about just the vibration? Like, what about our cells vibrating? Like if everyone's singing, well, when you sing, there must be just this vibration that is felt through the body and you know, affects the cells. But then if you bring multiple people together, and it's not just energy, but actually the physical vibration of your body with the sound, that's got to do something too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why I love playing. Cloudbelly isn't that loud of a band, but in the past when I've played with like really, really loud bands, just standing in front of an amplifier and like literally just like feeling the vibrations through your body is fantastic. But there's actually,
but not for your ears.
Yeah, well, I was wearing earplugs, but there's something about old guitars. You know, this idea that like people love vintage guitars. Mm-hmm. Well, there is a little bit more to it than just the idea that it's like special and old and like the neck feels worn in. There's as an instrument is played and it's receiving vibrations for, 50 years, it's getting these sort of same vibrations. The resin in the wood is crystallizing, and it's affected by the vibration and is crystallizing in certain ways. And so the instrument becomes more resonant over time because of this repetition of the vibrations. So when you pick up an old guitar that's been played a lot, there is this magical quality to it because it has the cellular structure has changed over time. So that's, I don't know what happens to human bodies, but in wood, that is what happens. That's just kind of cool.
That is really cool. I think also that kind of goes back to instruments. I think in the olden days, and now I'm sure there's instrument makers who must feel this way, but especially when you're using wood, and there was almost an animist perspective to the instrument, like it came from this tree and this tree is still alive in this way. And then the horsehair made up the bow, and, using the actual parts that were living and then thinking now this is like a new being that creates something else. And that, the musician and the fiddler, for example, were connected and in a very special way that went beyond just an object.
Yeah, I do feel, especially when I'm in a flow state, that the guitar is just like an extension of my body, and you're as a musician, you're manipulating the air. You're sort of a you're sort of a magician, augmenting the air around people to create, harmony. Um, and when you think about harmony is when you're splitting up a note into even chunks, and so you're just creating kind of uniformity in the airwaves, which is kind of far out, but it's when you start to think about the physics of what's happening when you're actually playing, it's really cool. It's really beautiful. Um, and yeah, music is, I don't know, it's such a special art form, because as opposed to visual art, where it's like you see an image and that could evoke, like, it might evoke a certain feeling because of the way it looks, or it might not for a different person. With music, when you're hearing these a melody or a chord progression, it's not up for you to interpret how it makes you feel. It just makes you feel something. And so it's kind of crazy that, like, these vibrations in the air change how you feel. It's
Right. So you mean like music without words?
yeah.
Yeah, like just music. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that is pretty fascinating. How can music, like we use it still in movies to evoke a scene and a feeling of, whether it's fear or joy, and who decided that this music was scary and this music was uplifting?
Right. I mean,
It's really interesting.
yeah, it just is,
Yeah, it just is.
Yeah, we have
we just know.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, uh, yeah, it's really fascinating. But evoking a feeling, and trying to, as you kind of read in my bio, something that is really, I like to do, is try to capture the feeling and essence of a certain place, or make a different place feel a different way. And it's really I'm really fascinated by how sound can do that, and sound is really effective at doing that. And so then it just makes you, I don't know, it makes you wonder about, in our world, hearing the wind, hearing the ocean, hearing like thunder, hearing like low vibrations of, just the world around you, rustling of leaves. All these things create different emotions in us. Or like hearing a baby cry, or birds chirping. I don't know. It's just really, I'm really fascinated by how
Yeah.
these different sounds make us feel.
I was thinking about birdsong when you said that, like that birdsong typically creates joy and serenity in humans as well, but birds sing like that when it's safe. Again, it comes back to that same sense of like safety and peace. There's not a predator around. There's not a storm coming. It's peaceful and it's happy, and birds are singing. And we've connected that. We've made that connection as a human over many, many years. And also, in the spring, things are awakening. Birds are out singing and chirping, and the world is waking up, and we're hearing that, and we're feeling that uplifting sensation.
Right. And then the opposite of that too, when birds are singing and then they stop and everything's silent all of a sudden, then that something's wrong, and to look out for something. Yep. And so that creates a little bit of sense of like anxiety or fear. So yeah, it's fun to manipulate all of those things to kind of create a sonic world. Yeah, I love it.
So what is next for you? What's your next big project? Is it stuff with Cloudbelly? Is there personal things coming up? What's next for you?
Yeah. So Cloudbelly is going to be doing more touring this year, working on our new record that we're already in kind of pre-production for. It's going to be great. And so yeah, otherwise for my solo stuff, I have a small piece that did just open at Mass Mocha Um, there's sort of a smaller kids piece that's sort of preliminary to the bigger full scale piece that's going to open in the spring. And that's a project that I've been working on with a cedar maker, John Bechtold, for the past 2.5 years. And I've made, probably a dozen hours of music that we've taken bits and pieces of. And it's this audio walk and this audio experience that goes all throughout Massimoka, which is this huge old mill building that's been converted to this really incredible kind of world-class contemporary art museum. And so I've been sort of anticipating the opening of this for years. So we'll see what happens, if that might kind of beget more work. I think it might. So it's very exciting. But then also I've this past year started doing a lot of composition for theatrical pieces. So there's probably going to be a few more of those on the docket. Yeah, I am trying to get more pro about myself as a composer. It's sort of been this kind of side project that happened during the pandemic that has been getting more and more of a real career, becoming more and more of a real career path. So, we're about to launch a website for myself, and once this Massimoka piece opens in full, we'll see where it goes. I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. I'm excited to see it too.
Yeah.
Or hear it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was really cool. I love to see how the conversation progressed. Where can people find you? What are your socials, your personal and Cloudbelly?
Yeah. Cloudbelly's at Cloudbelly the band. You can follow me at Samuel Vincent Perry. And I'm about to launch a new website, samvperry.com. So check it out. Oh, and I'm on Bandcamp. I'm on different streaming services.
Spotify. Cloudbelly's on Spotify.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So check it out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. In that review, I would love to hear what topics you'd like to see covered next and which guests you'd love to hear from in future episodes. You can connect with me on Instagram at Original Being Podcast, and be sure to follow, like, and share the podcast on all platforms to help spread the word. Thanks for listening.